A little warm for you, is it? It's kind of warm. Good afternoon. I'm just sitting here Indian style, enjoying myself, enjoying the warm weather. And I thought I might start up some Smith cuttings that I cut back in November. And here it is around the 10th or so, 9th or 10th of March. And I'm not making a big deal out of this. You know, they say there's 10 ways to skin a cat. I don't know if I like that old adage. But there are lots of different ways to do things. And sometimes it's not chipped in granite. It just comes down to individual preference sometimes. People like to be creative. People just have an individual style they like to assume when they're doing many, many things. It's just technique. And one might be as good as another. I just thought I would, because it's often talked about, starting cuttings, I just thought I would show you the way I do it sometimes. And sometimes I do it differently. It depends. It depends on the time of the year, what type of cuttings, what my goals are. And sometimes later in the season, I'll just put them right into the ground. There's just all different types of methods. And that includes storing them. Now here, I just want to show you a little method that I use. Now many people melt wax, and that's fine. And depending on the grade of the wax, if it's pliable, if you put it in the refrigerator afterwards, it won't crack and dry out. You can use wax. You could use other methods. But you know, many, many years ago, I just used to cut out little squares out of cellophane, and I wrap them around the end after I take my cutting, and I put rubber bands around it, like that. And that's what I do. And I guarantee you, if you have cellophane around the end of your cutting, it's not going to evaporate. It's going to retain the moisture. And wax will do that too. It could crack in a refrigerator when it gets cold, and this and that, if you move them around. And probably not. It doesn't matter. It's just another technique. It's just something that I always do. And when I get when I cut a cutting in two places because it's long, I just do that on. I do that on both ends. Here, and then I wrap them. Can you take this down? Here we go. Come on, just a little bit closer. All right, but then I just wrap them in the cellophane. Make sure they're fairly sealed. But you can see that this one has cellophane over it too, and just rubber bands. Now this is pretty long, and I might decide to cut it in half and put two in each one of these little pots. And there's another reason to do that too, because you don't need a real long cutting for one thing. And you're wasting an opportunity to get two trees instead of one. One might fail, so you have a better chance of better odds if you cut this in half and use it two instead of one. Also, when you put this in the pot, like how far do you really want to go down? Okay, if you go down too far, it might be too moist down there. Or if you're watering from the top and you don't have a container, I like to keep a container under mine so I can make sure that I get saturation in the bottom of the pot and it doesn't dry out. But if you're just watering from the top and this is out somewhere like that, often the water won't go all the way down if you're not cognizant of that problem, if you're not aware of it. And your cutting will be starved of water. It's better to put it, I feel it's better to put it about in the middle of the pot. And this way, you're much more likely to keep moisture there. It's not going to be too wet and soggy like it can get on the bottom sometimes, Okay, it's not going to dry out too much if you're too far up to the top. Okay, and you can see you can cut this cutting in two and still be able to do that. Put it about in the middle of the pot. That's where I like to put mine. And the less you have coming out of your potting mix, the less is the tendency of it to dry out. That's just common sense. Very often when I put my cuttings in the ground, when the ground warms up in the spring, I put them all the way down to where there's only an inch or two above the ground. I put them right in the ground. And I cut them at different levels and I stick them in the ground, and you're going to get a better chance of success that way. And they almost always do very, very well, providing that you plant them when the ground's warm enough. Like say in May, and mid-May is a good time, or even early June or the end of May is a good time for putting cuttings in the ground, I feel. And when you have little cuts like this, if you're going to cut this off, and I'm not, I'm going to let this be a tree, okay? You can put a little wax on there too, or just a little bit of tar or something, anything, a pruning material, and that will keep it sealed from drying out. And I like to put a little bit of dirt in, and then I like to put a little bit of water in, because it takes a while for the water to permeate the potting soil. So you want to keep it moist. You don't want to keep it wet, but you want to keep it moist. So if you water the first time, if you just put layers of water and layers of potting soil, this will guarantee that you don't have any dry spots. I like to do it that way. And I just build it up gradually. And then eventually, I'll put this in about halfway. I'll cut it in half. I'm going to do that. Here I've got some other cuttings of Smith, and I'm probably going to take this too. And what I'll do is I'm going to cut it here a little below the node and put that in and just leave a little bit out. And then I'm going to take a little bit of that cellophane paper and I'm going to put a rubber band around it here and keep it sealed on the top. Because again, the wax can crack and it can let moisture escape. So I like to use the cellophane. And I'll just move the cellophane. I'll cut this right about here below the mode, okay? And then I'll put the cellophane here and put the rubber band right there. All right, and that'll keep it moist. Of course, this one comes off, of course. Okay, so let's take this off. Now, what I like to do too, since this was several months ago, is I do like to chop off the end to get a fresh cut, so that this cutting will better be able to wick up the water. And I like to pre-soak mine. It's something that I do too. And I'll pre-soak them sometimes for several days to make sure that there's a lot of moisture. Now, sometimes if it's very, very dormant, you might not get any wicking, but maybe you get a little wicking, because that's the natural tendency of the plant. And plants do wick up moisture even in the wintertime a little bit, and they even grow sometimes. And we should know that. But you can see, I can tell by looking at the buds, I can tell that they're greening up. Can you see that? They're greening up really well, and they've been wicking up water in the last couple of days. It's better to have more moisture than less, and it's certainly not going to hurt. It's a practice that will not hurt. So again, snip off the ends and get them nice and fresh. You want that. I'll take this rubber band off too. There we go. Take the little cellophane off. I might even use the same cellophane when I cut this in half to put it over the top and put a rubber band on it to keep it moist. And I have been pre-soaking these for several days, and I can see them greening up. I can see the buds greening up. So they are wicking up water, and they're ready to be put in the potting mix. I'll just finish this one here. It's fun, it's something to do. I'm enjoying myself. Now, sometimes I'll leave them in these containers, and every once in a while I'll put some water in the bottom of the container so that I know that there's water and moisture being absorbed at the bottom. You need to do that. And remember that, and let's cut this. I'm going to cut this. what I'm going to do with this one. I'm going to cut this one right here. Now that doesn't look like very much, but it's plenty. And I'm going to push it down about halfway so that only this one, only that little bit is going to be above the surface. Can you see that? But that's plenty to be above the surface. Okay? The next one will be longer. This one I might take a little off of it and plant this part and just discard this piece. I have plenty of cuttings, and from my last video I mentioned that I took my Smith tree, which was a pretty large tree, and I cut it up quite a bit. I cut it into a lot of cuttings, and I have about 40 cuttings in my refrigerator, so I have plenty. So if I need to nip off this piece right down here to make a perfect cutting, then I can do that. I think I will. Right there. Now, the subject comes up about root hormones. Do you need root hormones? No. Can it help sometimes? Yes. Will it hurt? Probably not. Do I use root hormones sometimes? Yes, I do. Do I usually use root hormones? No, I don't. Why? Because I don't need to use them. I never had to use them that much. I've done it and it works, and sometimes it doesn't seem to work as well. So, of course, it might depend on the product too and the method, but you don't need to use a rooting hormone. Can you use a rooting hormone? Yes, of course you can use it. There's 10 ways to skin a cat, as I said, but you don't need to do that. And the best advice I can give you is relax. It's not rocket science. It's nature. Facilitate nature. Facilitating nature is the key. I remember when I was a teacher, I always said, I'm not an educator, I'm a facilitator. I facilitate education. I help my kids learn. You can't make them learn. You can't learn for them, but you can make conditions that are conducive to learning, and that's facilitating education. All you're doing here is facilitating nature. Nature will take over. Nature knows what to do. Nature knows better than we do. Very often man will interfere with nature and cause it to be less efficient, less effective. We don't want to work against nature, we want to work with nature. And it's not rocket science. Stick it in there about halfway down and water it. That's all, and it will grow. Most of the time it will grow. I don't fuss over it too much. And I find that with figs, especially, I don't need to. So I just thought I would welcome your visit today, a short visit, have a little fun. I'm looking forward to getting these all planted away and let them start to bud out. And I'll be planting these. My plan about these is I want to give some of them to my friends. And in 7B, where I have a property, I have an experiment going on, also in 7A, with Smith, to see if it will be able to survive the winter unprotected. Now, I know that most winters in 7A, it will not be able to survive unprotected. I know that already. But for experimental purposes, I have a continuing video to pick up on that subject as we go on, as we move into the spring and into the summer. But in 7B, there's a good chance that Smith, like many of the other varieties that I grow, will be perfectly adapted to be able to survive the winters there without being protected. And I don't protect in 7B. And I've had very good luck in 7B in my location. And so I have an experiment, an ongoing experiment there. And if Smith survives, I'm going to be planting several of these trees in 7B, in the ground, because I love Smith. And it's just a wonderful variety for the Northeast and for humid conditions. And I like the taste of it, and I like everything about it. I like several really, and there's several varieties that I really care for. But I do want to get more of these in the ground if they can survive the winter. So with that, thank you for visiting. I'm just using Miracle Grow this time. It was available, at the local grocery store. So I just grabbed the bag. Some tiny pots, small pots. I guess they're half-gallon pots. Few essential tools, not many. A cup of coffee, a little patience, a little enthusiasm. Remembering that there are variations of doing these things. There are different methods, different techniques. You can be creative. You can develop your own methods over time. Most of them work well. The ones that don't work well for you, discard them and find newer and better ways to do it. But eventually, you'll be able to find your comfort zone in propagating fig cuttings, as I have done. I do it several different ways. This is one of the ways I do it. You're welcome to give it a try. With that, hey you. Good day.